Town, Detroit, recording live. Prepare yourself for a hoppy drive. If you're chilling at home, pop that growler and just kick back for the next 2 hours. It's the end of the week, so here's to the weekend. It's Better on Draft with Rob, Matt, Nick, and Ken.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 235. My name is Ken. This is Better on Draft. Boy, have I had a week. I will tell you guys right now. Definitely one trip to the hospital later. Nobody should ever in their life have to suffer from back spasms. So because I am on medication, so you all know, I am only drinking my Cherry Coke Zero. No alcohol or booze for me today. Drink responsibly, folks. That's what the labels on the little pill bottles say. So, as I drink responsibly, I want to go around and introduce everyone, see how you're all doing. Nick, how are you doing?
I regretfully, unfortunately for you, I'm doing a little bit better. It is the birthday weekend, so I'll be drinking for you tonight and tomorrow and Sunday when my actual birthday is. Doing it like I normally do in Nick fashion, the double fist. For the mini beer, I got the Crop Duster from
Grand Armory.
Grand Armory, thank you. And then from Storm Cloud, the Night Swimmer Stout. Got that in the can, put it in the glass. The Cheers glass from Boston, if you can tell. Can you make that out? Yeah, cheers.
Yep,
there you go.
As Ted Danson said, we're closed.
We're closed. So not doing too bad in the end. So.
Awesome to hear. Wendy, how are you? What are you drinking? Oh, looks like, Wendy, we're having some audio issues.
We have no audio.
No, we are not hearing any audio from you.
Hit that unmute button.
Move on.
There we go. We got you.
We got you. Go.
The beauties of live audio.
Let's try it again. Wendy, how are you?
All right. Am I good now?
Yes.
Good.
All right. So I did not have any hospital visits this week, which is fantastic after my month. I actually pre-gamed a little bit with the white chocolate cherry milkshake IPA Queen of Hearts from Supernatural. Tastes a little bit like rock and rye. I'm enjoying that one thoroughly. But I also have a new Glarus spotted cow. My Wisconsin mule came through. So thanks, Kim.
Nice.
Awesome. Rob, how are you? And what are you drinking?
Things are going pretty good over here. We're in week 2 of virtual schooling. And I got to say that, for being somewhat quarantined in this house and doing schoolwork, that from what I'm seeing is that these kids are getting it done, and I'm pretty proud of them right now because that with everything that we have to live through, that they are kicking some ass. So just from that alone, I'm doing pretty damn good. And plus, I finally finished a refinance on my house after 5 months of refi, so the refi is done. So definitely good with that. Right now, I am also double fisting. I grabbed one of the bottles courtesy of Tavor, the Axis Mundi from Mad Tree Brewing. And also one of the bottles that is very difficult to get a hold of, especially in the not so great state of Michigan, because you can't get it here in Michigan, is New Glarus Strawberry Rhubarb.
Oh, nice.
Which is tasting very nicely right now.
Dan, how are you? Has it have we broke under 100 this week?
Oh, no, not at all. We were at 110 yesterday. What are you talking about?
What day is that? 50?
That's like 55, 56, somewhere in there. I've stopped counting. More worried about the fires surrounding us on all sides. That's kind of a bigger issue.
Well, what you got in your glasses over there?
I'm over here celebrating Nick's birthday, especially since I saw you eat gas station sushi a little while ago.
That was not gas station sushi. That was not. It was from a restaurant.
Okay,
you
sure.
You can't dine. See this?
Yep,
For the people that are not watching on video, I'm flipping Dan.
Anyways, I've got a new Howland Dragon's Milk. Had to go back to one of the best out there.
Is that the basic one?
Yeah, just the regular one.
The regular one?
Yeah, and then I've got the Half Acre Original Reaper Stout. Not a bad beer. Probably would pass on it again. It's kind of watered down, but gets the job done at 4 in the afternoon.
Well, the odds of two people bringing in some beer from out of state because we can't get it in this state, that is New Glarus beer. Let's introduce our guest. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
I'm Dan Carey, and I'm the brewmaster at the New Glarus Brewing Company.
Brewmaster at New Glarus. Welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking your time. New Glarus is out of what state?
You've ever heard of Wisconsin?
I have. Oh, no.
Oh, come on.
And you guys distribute to how many states?
Grand total of 1.
Total of 1. All right. So I'm going to ask the first question and kind of just slowly hand it off to everyone. What was the very first beer that was the New Glarus brand? What was the first beer that you brewed over there?
We started in 1993 as a lager brewery, and the first beer we made was called Edelpils. It was like a Pilsner based on a Czech style of beer.
Nice. So I guess in terms of
Hold on, my volume went out. Why did this happen again?
Okay.
There we go. All right, continue. Hi, everybody.
Okay. All right. So tell us about obviously New Glarus has been around for quite a while. I guess give us a history of your experience in the brewing world and what brought you into creating New Glarus.
Well, I started when I was in college. I went to the University of California at Davis, and I studied food science, mainly brewing science, but also dairy science and winemaking because it's an agricultural school. And during the summers, I worked as a supervisor at a peach cannery in Emeryville, California, working the night shift. And I also studied brewing, so I did an internship at a River City Brewing Company in Sacramento, California. And when I graduated, I worked for mainly small breweries, craft breweries. Back in the early 80s, there was like 15 breweries, total craft breweries in the country at that time. I think we were probably one of the first 5, the brewery that I was working at. I did that for some years, and then I went over to Germany and with my wife and children and near Munich, and worked at the Eyinger Brewery as an apprentice brewer. I came back and I went to Siebel's technical brewing school for a 13-week program. I worked for a company, Building Breweries, JV Northwest out in Portland, Oregon. Then I went to work for Anheuser-Busch. And at that point, you know, I'd pretty much done everything from the smallest breweries to the largest brewery in the world. And my wife really did not want to be a corporate wife, because working in a large brewery, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like the military, in that I was the equivalent of a lieutenant as a supervisor. And when you're the wife of a supervisor or a lieutenant, you kind of have to kowtow to the captains and higher ups wives. And so she had to, you know, put on Christmas parties and teas and all this stuff, which she hated. So she said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go back home to Wisconsin. And if you come with me, I'll build you a brewery and we'll make our own beer, which is literally what she said. So I said, okay, I guess I'm going to quit. And we packed up in a U-Haul and moved to Wisconsin, which is her home state. I'm originally from San Francisco. And so we moved to Wisconsin, which we got here in like July 1st in 1993. And it was like about 800 degrees and 300% humidity. And being a kid from San Francisco, it was kind of shocking. And so basically we found a warehouse and we negotiated a deal with the owner that we traded stock for capacity for getting into the building. He gave us 1 year free to be in the building. We didn't have to pay anything down. And after a year, we had to buy the building. And so during our time together, we had bought old houses, fixed them up, and made a little bit of money, moved into a new house, kind of, you know, nowadays they call it flipping houses. And we did that, and we had like $40,000 saved up. And so we took that money and we started to build this brewery in '93. It was just basically me and her, and her dad was helping us. And we just started building the brewery, and she found equipment at an auction, bought up old brewing equipment, and we were just about out of money, and we found enough investors to get seed money to get the brewery going. We sold stock. At that time, Schreier Malting gave us 120 days credit, so we didn't have to pay for malt, and we just barely made it, start the brewery, and we've just been literally running since then. So it's been whatever that is now, since '93, 27 years of pushing, steadily growing. The first year we made 300 barrels, and last year we made about 240,000.
Wow.
Damn.
So you said it, and I heard that. Well, actually, what you said is you were from San Francisco. I had heard that the first time you had a beer, you were 6.
Oh yeah, I always love beer.
Would you have like a Busch Light or?
Oh, Olympia.
Oh, even better.
Olympia.
Beer.
But with that love of that taste of the beer that you had, like starting so young, when did you start? When did you start getting into the idea of just making beer, or rather, when did you actually make your first beer?
Well, first of all, the first, big beer that I had, being from San Francisco, was Anchor, and I was probably 13 or 14 years old, and that, Anchor steam beer, it just the exotic label, exotic bottle, and this big flavor and dark, rich character just absolutely blew me away. And I didn't do much home brewing, but I did home brew a few times, all grain brewing when I was in college. I started college in 1978, so probably 1980 I started thinking around with home brewing.
Mm-hmm. And Anchor is, I guess for myself, that is actually the first brewery I ever took a tour at. So that is it is a really nice place that they have in there.
Beautiful.
But obviously, you said that you've apprenticed in Munich. One thing I've always seemed to notice is that anyone that goes and makes beer in Germany, when they come back, they tend to make beers that stick to style. Is that an area that, obviously you've been doing this for quite a while. Is that something that you will always stay true to?
Yeah, I would say so. I think you're right. I think that's a astute observation. German technology is such that you kind of you stick with the process, and this is how beer is made, and this is how you do it. And also, one thing about German beer is it's so good that you pretty much all Helles, okay, there's differences, but a Helles tastes like a Helles, a Pils tastes like a Pils. No matter where you go, you're pretty much guaranteed that if you order a beer anywhere in Germany, it's going to be a good beer and it's going to be true to style. So that kind of rubs off on you after a while, and it's a way of thinking that you a disciplined way of thinking. That's why Germans, I think, make such good engineers, because everything is disciplined. Like they're not like, hey, well, let's try this today. Let's try that today. They kind of stick with what works. And
it's true. We wouldn't have went to the moon with them. That is for sure. It's a fact. So just pointing it out.
Yeah.
I knew a guy whose father was a tank commander in the German army, and he said that the reason why the Americans beat us is he was a tank commander, and he said when our tanks broke down, they were so complex that we had to sit on the side of the road and wait for engineers to come and fix the tanks. With the American kids, when their Sherman tanks broke, they just got out and using whatever they could find on the side of the road, they'd make their tanks run. And so they were able to keep going because they could adapt. Whereas the Germans, their technology was so advanced that they weren't able to do that.
Yeah. Now, one of those styles, of course, that kind of comes from that area, being lagers. Lagers tend to not be as popular here in the U.S.? I mean, obviously, almost every brewery has one, but there always seems to be that, oh, I got to get that new barrel aged stout, or I need to get that new hazy IPA, or I need to get, well, it's September, I need to go get that pumpkin ale. Sorry, Big Machine. But talk to us about why lagers are so good, and do you think that, we had last year, there was an article that basically was asking people what was going to be the it style of 2020, and a lot of brewers wanted lagers to be that style. Yeah. Do you see a path where lagers can kind of take the world by storm again, the way hazy IPAs have done over the last 3 years?
No. I think you're astute that brewers, if a brewer goes to a brew pub and they, all brew pubs, they have like 8 IPAs and then they might have a Pilsner or whatever. Almost every brewer will drink the Pilsner. So lager beers are what brewers drink. And because they're refreshing, they're drinkable, they're different than the norm of what we're used to, and they're really hard to make, and they're about subtlety, and you can drink a good lager all night. But customers don't appreciate that, and they really, I've had people in Wisconsin say to me, look, if I want a lager, I'm going to drink Paulaner, I'm going to drink Czech Bar, I'm going to drink Pilsner Urquell. Why would I drink an American lager when I can get draft spot in Oktoberfest? So, and also lager beers, particularly in the English tradition and the American tradition, are somewhat dumbed down, yellow fizzy, that whole yellow fizzy thing. And so for people are looking for impact. They're not looking for subtlety. Whereas brewers want something subtle to drink, people want impact. And so they lean towards more flavorful beers. But for us, it's sort of like, yeah, been there, done that. Been there, done that.
Right. Now, I guess going to another style, which I think from pretty much what I was reading was that obviously with breweries, they all have their trials and tribulations. I saw that you guys had to deal with in the early years that you had to deal with a sewage charge from the federal government in trying to keep everything running. And the big beer, what was that?
How do you know that?
How did you know that, Rob?
Yeah, Rob, explain that.
I'm not a researcher by trade, but I look up. But the big beer that really, it seemed like that really took you over the hump was, of course, one of the ones that Wendy has right now, and I have right now, is the Spotted Cow.
Yeah.
Talk to us about coming up with this, because I believe this is a farmhouse ale.
We call it, yeah.
Yeah. I guess talk to us about that beer and how that really catapulted New Glarus into the beer scene.
It's total dumb luck. And the reason is because we've made 200 different beers, and they're all our children, and we all want them to succeed out in the world. So Spotted Cow was in no way any different than any of the other 199 beers that we've ever brewed. It was just another one. We sit down every year and we say, hey, why don't we brew this, or why don't we brew that? And this beer was just simply another beer. So what had happened was there is a open air museum not far from us where they have like homesteads, like they have like a German and a Yankee homestead and Norwegian homestead of all these immigrants that had come to Wisconsin, and they would buy these buildings and move them to this relatively large tract of land. And you walk through the woods and you visit these farms, and there are people in period outfits, and they're cooking and they're working the land with horses and all the stuff that when I'm talking about open air museum. We went to the German homestead, which was like a 1850s homestead, and in their root cellar they had a crock pot of beer. And I thought to myself, I wonder what beer in Wisconsin would have tasted like in those days. What would they have made? And I thought, Pilsners were just coming about. They would have used local ingredients. Maybe they would have got some nice hops from Czech Republic if they were a successful farmer. It would have been unfiltered. It would have been a top fermented beer because it's made without refrigeration. And so I said, I'm going to brew this type of beer that I think it would have in a farm in the late 1800s in Wisconsin, and just for fun. So I made this beer, and we had won an award for one of our beers, Belgian Red, and we went to England to receive the award in the springtime. We were driving around the country just on a Sunday, and there were sheep, lambs everywhere. And my wife said, "What's the deal? There's no people out here. All there are is sheep. There's sheep everywhere." And then she said, I bet that's what people think when they come to Wisconsin. What's the deal with all these spotted cows? And then she said, that'd be a great name for a beer. And I said, I think I have the perfect beer for that. So we made this beer, and our wholesalers were not very happy. They're like, come on, dude, we're not going to be able to sell a beer called Spotted Cow. Who's going to go into a bar and order a beer called Spotted Cow? I had one wholesaler literally come into the brewery on a you know how old men are, came in and he started yelling at me and saying, beers are supposed to be called like Schlitz or Miller or Coors.
Where's my Schlitz?
What the hell is Spotted Cow? But for whatever reason, it just took off. It wasn't like we did anything. We brew beer and we bring it to the distributors and they sell it. And this beer just kept selling and it sold faster and faster and faster. And it took us by surprise. It wasn't like we had a focus group and we set out to do this. I mean, frankly, like all brewers, we brew beers with the hope that we're going to sell 200,000 or 300,000 barrels of it, but rarely accomplish that. And this, for whatever reason, struck a chord with people in Wisconsin.
Right. Now, and I guess we might as well get this one completely out of the way because, there's always the people that will bring this up. And I'm sure this has been brought up more than enough times. But obviously with New Glarus, to kind of paraphrase one of our other breweries that was here in Michigan that used the slogan but doesn't use it anymore, being
Michigan, I know where you're going.
Michigan brewed, Michigan only. This right now is Wisconsin brewed, Wisconsin only for right now, because obviously you guys were in Oregon, New York City, you're in Chicago, but there is a lot of popularity nationwide. I mean, as you can kind of tell with us alone because of my craziness with trying to get strawberry rhubarb, and that was a feat in itself. And truthfully, this is probably one of the best damn strawberry beers ever. I mean, the amount of strawberry that comes in this is amazing.
Truth.
Yeah. But is there like a sign or something that can happen in the beer world that will put you into the area of distributing out of state again?
I never like to say never, but it's not really in our plans because the problem is that breweries that continue to grow for the sake of growth, you can go up quickly, but you can also come down quickly. And I've heard stories. I've been in the brewing business since the 80s when breweries were closing and nobody wanted local beer. So I know that things can be difficult and that it's a good time right now, but it's not always going to be good times. And so our vision for our company has always been to be economically strong. And when you sell beer a long way away, unless you support it with marketing and advertising and salespeople, it becomes very, very expensive. So, business is a lot like war in the sense that you're only as strong as your supply chain. And we're better off having a strong relationship with our wholesalers, our retailers, and our customers in Wisconsin. They know us, they know what they get with us, and we're not fighting in 50 states. It's sort of like farming in the sense that if you're a good steward of your land, you may not be the richest farmer, but you'll be successful in the long term, as opposed to slash and burn farming. And if you sell farther and farther and farther afield, your numbers keep going up, and then you imagine that you're better than you start to believe your own press. You believe that you're better than you really are. Whereas if you have to rely on people drinking your beer every day, it's got to be something that's consistent and shelf stable. And so it's more economical, and it forces us to be a better brewer than saying, hey, we're going to come up with a new beer and put it out on the shelf, and people check it off their list on ratebeer.com and they move on to the next beer. That's not a sustainable business plan. I mean, what do we got? 350 million, 360 million people in the country. Eventually, everybody's going to try it and be done with it. And that's not a good long-term sustainable goal. But more importantly, we're a small company, and we really don't want to be trying to take on the world. It's expensive. Every barrel of beer that capacity that you build is going to cost you at least $100 or more. And it doesn't really pay when you ship your beer all the way across the country. We rather be small and control our business.
Well, let me ask you, you brought up a good point right there. You're saying once everyone tries it, no one's going to want it anymore. I'm drinking, it's gone now. I'm drinking a Dragon's Milk in Arizona. This is a Michigan distributed beer. And until not that long ago, you couldn't really get it out of the Midwest. So, I mean, if it's a good beer, like take Spotted Cow, for example, I've had it. The only time I've drank that is here because someone brought it to me in Arizona when they were in Wisconsin. It's one of the few yellow beers I would drink, and I would drink it regularly. Don't you think, with how good it is, that people would continue to buy it if you distributed it to other states outside of Wisconsin?
And that's a good point. And I would hope they would, but the problem would be if we sell 250,000 barrels in our home state of Wisconsin, if we sell in 50 states and 6 countries, then maybe we would be, I don't know. I mean, I don't mean this in a vain way, but maybe we'll be 1 million barrels or 2 million barrel brewery or bigger. And then, I'm just a podunk kid from San Francisco. No way that I can run a 2 million barrel brewery. The amount of money that it would take is huge. So now all of a sudden I've taken on my wife and I, because my wife, frankly, is the brains of the business. She's an entrepreneur. She would take on, she would have to, there's not enough local banks to give us that kind of money. So now we have to take on investors. We need specialists to help us. And we lose control of the business. And then all of a sudden, we have vampire capitalists who own the business saying, hey, what's the deal here? You're paying too much money for your malt. Why are you paying your people so much money? We can find labor cheaper than what you're paying. You need to expand. And all of a sudden, our beautiful little community in New Glarus, Wisconsin, becomes a different entity, and it's not who we are. It's like saying to somebody, like I'm sure you have a local restaurant that you like to go to, and they have really nice food and it's really special, and you go there from time to time. But if all of a sudden they franchise and there's one in every large avenue across America, it's a totally different business. And the guy who's in the kitchen cooking, he ain't cooking anymore. And I want to still be cooking.
See, and that's the thing I'm kind of thinking about with Yuengling and their whole plan to start moving their stuff over to the Western states, is that in looking at your situation, I kind of like that idea where you're just kind of sitting back, and I guess from my own perspective, just kind of sitting back and seeing what happens to them. Because while they have a distribution map that they're now pushing to more states, and we'll see what happens to them. And you guys can just sit put.
Well, yeah, I would say that it is hard because for us we're having to we have to keep the share of what we call share of mind with our wholesalers, share of mind with our customers, share of mind with our retailers. And as you know, there's now a brewery on every single freaking corner in every single
Yep.
Ain't that the truth?
So it's difficult for us to stay relevant. So we are pedaling really hard. And as far as Yuengling, they've stood they're a family business that has stood the test of time. So I would never underestimate their tenacity. Running a brewery, anybody that's done it for a long time knows that it's a bare knuckle fist fight. And it's like water polo. All you see is heads popping above water, but there's a lot of kicking and pinching and scratching going on. And actually in the beer business, there's a lot of knives underwater. So I think Yuengling, they're going to do fine. They're a tough business. They're going to do fine.
Definitely. All right. Well, I'm going to pass the rock over to Wendy. So I think Wendy's got a couple questions here.
I do. So a couple of the things that you said really resounded really well with me. Over the years, I've read a lot about you and your wife talking about how your employees are so important to your business and how you want to make sure that you're taking care of them. So I just wanted you to kind of tell us a little bit about that philosophy and how it may have positively affected your business.
Yeah, so that's sort of, it's maybe, I'll risk sounding sappy here, but we've been impacted by, we're all products of our life experiences, how we were raised and how we were educated and things that befall us. So from my point of view, I went to 12 years of Catholic education, and the last 4 years were with Jesuits. And the thing about Jesuit priests is they don't discount science. So science and humanity are together the same. So God and science are the same. And probably the biggest Christian ethos that you learn from Jesuits and Pope Francis is a Jesuit, is that you are your brother's keeper. So it's important for you, whether you believe in God or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. What is important as a moral person, you are responsible for the people around you, for your family and for your employees. So, again, I apologize, but as a man, I'm responsible to my people. So that means that I have to do whatever I can to take care of those around me. Then my father he was a medic in World War II, and then he was a ambulance driver in the city of San Francisco. He was a shop steward. This is a non-union brewery, but never in my life have I ever crossed a picket line, and I never will. So even though I own a brewery or am part of a brewery, I understand labor. I respect labor, and I know that the working person is really what matters. So for us, and my wife's father was a shop steward in a General Motors plant. So we come from labor, come from lower middle class labor. We weren't rich. So that's how we view the world. And so if you think of business, most people think of business like a triangle. And the owner, the managers, the highest paid people are up here, and then the workers are down here. Well, we flipped it. So a servant leader means that you're down here and you hold up everybody above you. And when they rise, you rise. So we are I say that we're like a pit crew for a race car driver. And frankly, the people who are working on the bottling line, that are milling malt and carrying bags of malt, those are the real heroes, because frankly, if I don't show up for work, the bottle filler is going to keep spinning. If the filler operator doesn't show up, nobody's going to get beer. So who's more important in this picture? So it's a practical capitalism. It's servant leadership, and it's a moral imperative. And simply put, if you take care of your people, if you take care of your machinery, if you invest in your system, they're going to pay you dividends. So for someone to, when I see corporations that are laying off people and then paying their managers $1 million bonuses, it's a moral failure, and those businesses generally end up failing. So when we take care of our people, they take care of us, and they make better beer. And so it's an investment. It's so clear to me that I don't understand why anybody would do anything else. Anything else is abusive.
Wow.
Agreed. So I did read somewhere that AB InBev actually made an offer on New Glarus, and you guys turned them down.
Actually, they tried. They did try.
So my question is, not only obviously why did you go that route, but how good did it feel to tell your former bosses, thanks, but we're good?
Well, it's kind of funny because it was my wife that told them no, thank you. I'm a technician. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business person. I'm just a simple village brewer. Deb, my wife, is very much a business person. So when I left Anheuser-Busch, I was good friends with all of the people that I worked with and everybody that I knew. And so one of my friends, a brewmaster, said, hey, some guys want to come by your brewery and take a look. And, I said, okay, well, have them talk to Deb. And so Deb said, the brewery's not for sale. And they said, no, we just want to come by. We just want to come by. She said, look, we're not going to sell the brewery. And they said, no, we just want to come by and talk to you. So they came by, and you can tell a lot by people by looking at their shoes, and they had really expensive shoes on. And
at a brewery.
By the way, they were not brewers, and so she politely led them around the brewery and showed them the brewery and tasted beer and whatever. And it was one of those Wisconsin days when it was really that wet, nasty snow that's kind of half slushy and melting.
Oh.
So these guys wandered around and they said, hey, can we sit down and see if maybe we can work out a deal here, or how we can help you expand your business or whatever. And so she was walking with them towards the door, opened the door, and showed them out into the slushy snow with their multiple $100 shoes, and said, no thanks, we're good. And she closed the door, and I think it made her feel good. But I was a little uncomfortable with the whole thing, but she was.
So speaking of Deb, I do have another question too. As a woman who's interested in the brewing industry, I know that she has been a pretty solid advocate for women in the industry. How has New Glarus kind of evolved or done things to help her do that?
Her personally, you're saying? Well, so as I said, she's a fighter. She's a tough business person, and so I deal with all things brewery related. I design the brewery, the equipment. I order the malt. I order the hops. I brew the beer. I get the yeast. I do all of those technical things. She does all of the business and with the hard part, raising money, negotiating with wholesalers, dealing with retailers, and it's better now, but it's not. It's far from perfect, like a lot of things. There's a lot of sexism in the world and in the beer business, and so it's tough. She's kind of out there as the tip of the spear, and so she's pretty much done it herself. There's really not anything that I think we as a company have done. In fact, a brewing organization in the United States who will go unnamed, small brewers organization, called and said, hey, Deb, we want you to be on our board of advisors because we have a woman on the board and she is stepping down, and so we want you to come on. And she said, no, I'm not a woman entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. Right? I'm not going to come as your token woman. And so that's how she views it. She's not a woman entrepreneur. She's an entrepreneur. And the dream would be that someday that people are just accepted for their strengths and weaknesses, not for who they, what they look like or what sex they are, what their chromosomes are.
Amen.
Awesome.
But we try in our brewery. We don't differentiate. We have men and women in positions of authority. We have men and women in as brewers, and we try to we don't actively like keep quotas or anything like that, but we hire the best people we can find, and sometimes it's a man, sometimes it's a woman. I mean, in this day and age, since whatever it is, Title IX, in my experience, there's a lot of women here that kick my ass. So there's really no difference. And I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that what I mean by that is people are capable no matter what their sex are.
Yep. Agreed.
That's awesome. So I have one more question, then I'm going to hand it off to someone else. You were years ahead of everybody else when it came to making sours. And I'm just curious what it was that led you down that path when nobody else was doing it, because some of my favorite beers are from that line. So I'm just wondering what led you that way.
Well, that's really, we built the brewery because of sour beers, and sour beers are obviously a small part of our business, but the idea was to make sour beer when we started the brewery. So what had happened was, when I was an apprentice brewer in near Munich, one winter we it was 1986. We rented a car and we drove to Belgium and we visited breweries in Belgium, and I went to the Lindemans Brewery, and which is obviously a well-known great brewer at Lambic and sour beers and fruit beers and all these things. And we went, and it was just, in those days, it was just a little tiny farm, very rustic, out in the middle of nowhere, and it was raining out. And we went, and I was with my wife and our two little daughters. I think Katie was 1 year old and Nicole was probably 5. So we showed up, and I don't speak French and I don't speak Dutch, and we literally just, because I'm such a beer geek, we drove up and I went and knocked on his front door, and Rennie Lindemann, who was the owner and brewmaster at that time, I said, in my best fake French, that I was a brewer from America and could we see the brewery? And he was like, oh yeah, I think sometimes when people see you with two little kids, it's kind of like, how can you say no? So he took us around the brewery, and he pretty much spent the whole day with us. And he let us take pictures, and he told me how he made his beer, which was really kind of cool. So I came back home, and I had a little pilot brewery, and I started thinking around and with lactobacillus and Brettanomyces and cherries, and brewed beer up in our attic, in our hot attic. And it took 6 years, but I figured it out, and I thought, this is really cool. So I always loved sour beer, even back then.
Nice. All right, I think that will hand it off to Nick. I think Nick said he had some questions.
Yeah, dude, just a couple of easy ones, but I want to, if I can first, I want to convey a question from the chat. Two-part question. Do you get a lot of offers for collaborations with other breweries? And do you have any brewing companies? Are there any brewing companies that you would personally like to work with?
We have done collaborations, and from time to time people ask, but generally we say no, and really because we're kind of we do things the way we do things, and we're kind of quirky, and I find that sometimes collaborative beers are like both groups are trying too hard, and it shows in the beer that they're I wouldn't want to say showing off, but they're trying too many. Like, I'm going to try crazy things, you're going to try crazy things. Now it's crazy things squared, and oftentimes that makes for flavor that's maybe not marriage. So we generally don't do it, but we have done it with brewers in Europe. I did it with a brewery in Sweden I did it with a brewery in Belgium. As far as breweries that I would love to work with, I'm friends with he's retired now, but the brewmaster of the Augustiner Brewery. I would think it'd be fun to do something with them. Also, Schneider, Hans-Peter Drexler at the Schneider Brewery in Kielheim, Germany. They make Schneider Weiss. I know he's done collaboratives with my buddy Garrett Oliver, and I think even with other brewers. I'm also I love Vinny and Natalie at Russian River Brewing, and I think that they're spectacular brewers, and they would be fun to work with. We also did in the Sierra Nevada, actually, which was also fun. They're a wonderful group of people.
That question came from Jay in the chat. So Jay, thank you. So I have a couple questions. We know you don't distribute outside of the state of Wisconsin. Obviously, some Rob and Wendy they work to get your beer to their house, to their homes.
We got a guy.
What's that?
Got a guy.
You got a guy?
His plug hooked him up.
Yeah, plug. Where is the farthest you've ever seen your beer drank? Like in a different country or?
Yeah, in Europe, in like Switzerland, because Glarus is a canton of Switzerland. So there are a lot of people of Swiss descent that live in New Glarus. So I've seen it in Switzerland. I was we have draft horses, Friesian draft horses. If you're familiar with them, they're those kind of medium-sized, all jet black draft horses with long manes and long feathering. Beautiful horses. And we were having a problem. The village didn't want us to have horses because they were worried about too much horse manure. And there was somebody on the city council that just had a thing about horse manure, and so. We ended up calling it Manure Gate because we almost weren't able to get the horses. But in any event,
he might have driven his car into a manure cart back in the 50s. I don't know.
Yeah, something bad happened in his past. But I was in Germany at a little Gasthaus, a little pub in a little town in the middle of nowhere. Again, it's wintertime. I'm always in Germany in the wintertime. It was snowing outside, and I'm sitting there minding my own business, drinking a beer all by myself, and this guy walks by and he looks at me and he does a double take, and he was German, and he looks at me and in perfect English he says, "What's going to happen with your horses?" And it blew me away. Like how did I mean like I'm in the middle of nowhere in a little country town. How did you know? And he said, "Well, I don't know, internet," and walked by. Like number one, he had number two, you had to know the drama du jour that we were facing. So I guess in the end, it's a small world. The moral of the story is, even if you're in a pub in Germany, you got to behave yourself.
Ain't that the truth?
So go ahead.
So I had one more question, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan. So Ken was kind enough to introduce New Glarus to me several years ago, back, I don't even know how long ago. And one of the questions I was going to ask prior to today was, do you still make Serendipity? And it's still shown as a beer on the website. Yeah, we made it. Serendipity was, out of all the beers, and I'm not a big fruit beer guy, by far one of my most favorite beers, especially a fruit beer. It blew me away. Oh, dude, that's all right. So
make it every year or every other year. That beer came about because Belgian Red. There was a crop failure. The cherry trees were blossoming and they got a frost, and then they blossomed again and they got a frost, and then it happened a third time. So we used Wisconsin cherries. There was no cherries, and so we had a little carryover from last year. And my wife said, "What are you going to do? You got to come up with something." So I said, "Well, I can get apples, I can get cranberries, and I'll mix them together and come up with something." And I mixed all these fruits, and we did test fermentation and said, "Yeah, this is actually pretty good." And so it was a serendipitous event, hence the name Serendipity.
Nice. Yeah. So with that said, You classify Serendipity as part of your Thumbprint series. What exactly is the Thumbprint series?
Well, we have groups of beers, and they're all marketed towards different groups. So we have our year-round beers, like Moon Man and Two Women and Spotted Cow, and then we have our seasonal beers, like we make Staghorn Oktoberfest or Dancing Man, Hefeweiss, Totally Naked, light lager. So we do these beers seasonally, and then we have what are called thumbprints, and the thumbprints are in 4-packs. They're higher price beers, higher cost, and they're usually higher end, more impactful beers like a double IPA or our fruit beers because they're more expensive to make. So the thumbprint, it's sort of like a maker's mark. It's just the thumbprint handmade, and they're more esoteric or more impactful beers than say our regular seasonals or year.
Okay. Any chance that we're going to see a New England IPA in the Thumbprint series? Or are you not a fan at all?
I'd love to make one because I think I think they're great. I think the beers that I taste come out of New England, I really, really appreciate, especially as a fruit beer brewer. I love that they're able to extract that type of character. But it's not something that Deb has any interest in doing simply because I believe she doesn't want to be chasing. Because there's, I think you can't go to a brew pub. There's 8,000 breweries. I bet means that there's 24,000 New England IPAs already. And so she doesn't like us to chase because frankly, if we did that, then you're always like, well, I don't think it's as good as whatever brewery's beer. So we try not to try to go our own way.
Don't want to be part of that conversation.
Yeah,
totally get it.
I'd love to do it. We've done it. I've done it in our pilot plant. We've made, what I think, are really great ones, but they never see the light of day.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to the other Dan, the big machine Dan.
Yeah, I got one question here. Thank you, Nick. So I was looking at your website as well for the beers you make. I see you have a beer called Cabin Fever. Do you still make that?
Yeah, we do.
So my curiosity about this is there's a pretty big brewery with a lot of power behind it now, especially the last couple of years, making a beer with the same name. Have you gotten any pushback about that as far as the name goes?
I believe we've had that name for, I don't know how many years, but 20. So I don't really know because I don't deal with the business end. And these kind of things happen on a pretty regular basis. But I would imagine we've been using that name so long that I'm not worried about it. And in fact, sometimes, I don't know what happened with this beer, but sometimes people will call us and, brewing is somewhat collaborative and we all pretty well get along. And it's sort of like Deb might say, look, you can use the name, but you can't sell the beer in Wisconsin. And that's kind of an agreement that we come up with.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Well,
Right.
I am going to come in. Does anybody else have any other questions for Dan?
I have one last question.
Wendy's got one more question, Dan, and then we'll kind of cut you loose.
Speaking of beers that you make, my favorite New Glarus beer is actually Fat Squirrel.
Oh, okay.
Love that beer. My dad and I both did. I would send a girl every time she would go to Wisconsin to visit her family, she would pick some up for me to bring it back. And I really miss it. And I know that you have to change things up and try new things in order to keep everything moving fresh. Is there any beer that you would make that you would love to see come back?
Well, Fat Squirrel is in the tanks right now.
You just made my day.
But for me, like we started, it maybe kind of come full circle. We make a beer called Hometown Blonde, which is a Czech style Pilsner. And that beer I wish was a year round beer because we only made, like this year, we made like 40 barrels of it. And we only sold it basically in Greene County in New Glarus. And so I got a bunch in my refrigerator, and I would love, I'd love to make that beer all year round. But like we were talking earlier, Pilsners are not, don't really set the world on fire.
All right, Nick.
All right. I don't know if this is going to be the last question, but we'll take a stab at it. Lions versus the Packers this weekend. Lions are getting 6 points right now as the underdog. What do you do? Do you take the points or do you take Green Bay?
Well, by law, as a Wisconsinite, for religious reasons, I have to answer Wisconsin, Green
I
Bay.
don't even know why you're asking that, Nick, because that is like law.
You know what? Because I have to ask. Because from a Lions fan to I'm assuming a Packers fan, I have to ask that question, and that's all I heard on. That's all I heard on the radio today.
The important thing is do the Packers cover though? Do the Packers cover the 6?
Do you here? No. You don't think so? Here's my theory, and I'll pass it back to Ken. Aaron Rodgers has a chip on his shoulder. It's a revenge tour. They drafted Jordan Love in the first round. They traded up to get him. Aaron Rodgers has something to prove. He's going to prove it to the ownership of the Green Bay Packers, which are, by the way, the fans, the season ticket holders. Green Bay will not only cover the spread, but I say they're going to decimate Detroit.
Ouch.
And that is from a season ticket holder to the rest of the world.
Where's the game at this weekend?
In Lambeau.
Oh, yeah, they're done. Good night.
All right.
Robert, they're all picking on you.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you taking an hour out of your Friday evening to talk to us about beer. What was that?
I'm going to go home and eat dinner now.
All right.
All right.
Well, you go home. You've earned that dinner. We appreciate you. We will be right back with the news with the Better on Draft podcast.
Thanks, folks. That was fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.